What's going on, guys? Bobby Betts Fights. Back after a week off to go ahead and give you guys another breakdown for UFC Vegas 74, where we got Kai Kara-France facing off against Amir Albazi. So, going to go ahead and jump into the recap for last week, but first, make sure you follow your boy on the socials, on Twitter, Bobby Betts Fights, on YouTube, Bobby Betts Fights, and betmma.tips, website I use for third-party tracking, where you can go ahead and see my record, how much money I've won, and everything in between. betmma.tips if you want to follow me on there. So let's go ahead and jump into the recap for UFC Fight Night. Angela Hill versus Mackenzie Dern. So ended up up 0.6 units, which equates to $29.78. So week before was a small loss. This past week was a small profit. Really don't have too many regrets with the bets. The only thing that I do regret is last second throwing together this wild submission parlay, which cut into profit. Could have made a unit, ended up cutting into that because I spent $20 trying to win $1,000. Not a single leg hit on that parlay, but straight bets were fairly solid. We'll start off with the first one. Themba Gorimbo over Takashi Sato. Got that at minus 110. Ended up closing around minus 135. Pretty dominant performance by Gorimbo. Even knocked down Takashi Sato, which no one really expected. Expected the grappling advantage. Didn't expect him to hold his own in the striking. So the hands are coming along. Still pretty raw, Themba Gorimbo. But as far as that play, solid bet. Ended up winning that one. Next one, Nick Fiore versus Chase Hooper. Got that at minus 110. Closed right around minus 125. There was some buyback on Hooper late. And those that did buy back on Hooper were pretty pleased with the performance. Pretty dominating by Chase Hooper. Really might have misread not only myself, but everyone else who took Fiore. The striking advantage for Chase Hooper, I don't think anyone really saw that, but Fiore just throws 1-2 shots and he doesn't have that much pop on the end of his shots. Doesn't work behind the jab, which is something that I knew going into it, but kind of just overlooked it because fading Chase Hooper seemed pretty good after the Garcia fight. So Chase Hooper was willing to eat a shot to land 3 or 4. Fiore didn't know what to do. He looked like he was out of there. He was gassed by the second round. You could tell halfway through the second round that there was no shot that he was going to win that fight. The only thing Fiore really has going for him is toughness. So an L on that one, but we still got CLV. So, we keep getting CLV on these bets. We're eventually going to make money. So not terrible. Moving on, Gilbert Ravina versus Ryan Kosei. Got him at plus 128. He closed right around a pick'em. I believe plus 105 or plus 100. Dominating performance by Gilbert Urbina. Ryan Kosei was supposed to have the grappling advantage. Urbina totally floored him, not only on the feet, but also on the ground, and ended up finishing that fight. So got him at plus 128. He looked great. He looked minus 500. Ended up making $64 on that, about 1.28 units of profit. So good CLV, good performance. Love to see it. Next bet, Michael Johnson, plus 125. He ended up closing around plus 135, so I was a little weary of that bet. He looked like a superstar in the first round, fighting smart, but for some reason, when they... just like Josh Emmett, CDF went with that 1-2, where you kind of feint, just kind of a short jab to kind of gauge distance and just clear you with an overhand right hand, and he floored Johnson, knocked him out cold. It's going to happen, it's fights. So lost a unit on that. Last fight that we had for straight bets was Joaquin Buckley versus Andre Fialho. I got Buckley at minus 186. He ended up closing right around minus 215 on my books. And the judges in the first round, I thought Joaquin Buckley won the first round convincingly. 2 of the judges gave it to Fialho, looking back on it, which I thought was ridiculous. But regardless, Buckley ended up knocking him out with a head kick in the second round. I thought he was out-voluming Fialho. Fialho had some good counters. He's always got that check left hook, and he just kind of... It takes him a while to get into the fight. Honestly, if it went to the scorecards, he might have won it, depending on how it shaked out in the third. I think Buckley would have convincingly won the second, but two of the judges gave the first round to Fialho, which I thought was crazy. But regardless, it's a moot point. $40 in the pocket for that one, 0.81 units. So for straight bets, right around a unit of profit, $49.78. We'll round up there, call it a unit. So for those that care, the submission parlay was Dern by submission, Hernandez in the Shabazian fight to win by submission, and Demopoulos to win by submission. Just rolling right through those. Demopoulos had no shot in that fight. Kowalkiewicz fought smart. Demopoulos tried to pull guard a couple of times, and she just stood it right back up, peppered her on the feet, wasn't even close. That killed the parlay. Hernandez looked great against Shabazian, but he ended up KOing him in the third round. Completely outclassed him, which I thought would happen, but decided to go with the sub instead of a straight bet or something along those lines. I really wanted to take him inside the distance. What are you going to do? And then the next one, Dern by submission. I mean, she's going to be hunting for submissions in pretty much every fight. She came out like a bat out of hell and was just landing hard shots on Angela Hill, and Angela Hill's a tough girl. So, it gets in the later rounds. Mackenzie Dern knew she was up, wasn't going to take any risks. I didn't think that one was going to cash after two. Well, it wasn't going to cash because it was a parlay, but just that individual leg wasn't going to hit. You could tell after about 2 or 3 rounds. So, never going to complain with profit. A decent night on the cards. We always wish it was more, but if you're in the green, you're doing something right. So, let's go ahead and jump in and break down these fights. I'm going to do it a little bit different than I did previously because last time it was a little long-winded, over an hour of video. So I'm going to try to run through these. So the first fight that we got is Felipe Lins versus Maxime Grishin, a light heavyweight bout. So for this one, Lins opened plus 125 is the underdog. Grishin was minus 145. The handle was about even, 48% Lins, 52% Grishin. Lins holding 63% of the bets, and Grishin was about 37% of the bets. And because we had a week off, so looking at where it stands right now for that fight, Felipe Lins still an underdog, but plus 115. Maxime Grishin minus 135. Handle percent really hasn't changed. Felipe Lins 51%, 49% for Grishin, so 50-50 split there. Slightly more bets with Felipe Lins at 53%. So in this one, not too much movement. It's moving towards Felipe Lins. I think looking at the tape, I think Lins has a good shot. I do think it's more of a pick'em. I can see why Grishin's minus 135. He's been at light heavyweight. He has the experience. But both of these guys are older. I'd give the speed to Felipe Lins. He showed that in the Pacquiao fight, and he showed that in the OSP fight, but you don't really gain much from the OSP fight because OSP is a corpse of him, like a shell of himself at this point in his career. But Felipe Lins, good combinations on the feet. At light heavyweight, it doesn't seem like his gas tank is too zapped, and he is mixing in the wrestling well. Maxime Grishin is just a poster boy for consistency. A lot of people thought he won that fight against Dustin Jacoby, ended up dropping him twice. Jacoby, just the volume king, just outpaced him for the rest of the fight. But Grishin, you saw it in the Knight fight. That's another one where you don't really gain too much because William Knight, his past performances, that fight and then the one against Marcin Pacquiao, he just looked nothing like what he was when he came into the UFC. I'm not sure why, but just not a lot of volume. Just trying to muscle and throw one shot, one kill punches. I don't really know how to describe it, but Maxime Grishin, pretty consistent as far as how I see this fight playing out. I see it being pretty even on the feet. I can see Grishin having his moments, but I can see Lins winning the minutes, but Grishin landing a harder shot and winning a moment here or there. I think on the ground with the wrestling, I'd probably give the edge to Grishin, but I really see this one playing out on the feet. And if it's playing out on the feet, I do like Felipe Lins as the underdog. I don't have a bet on it. Line didn't move too much, and I just think it's such an evenly matched fight that it could go either way. I do see it going to a decision. I don't see either guy being able to put the other guy out. Both guys are fairly durable, which is surprising because Lins dropped down to light heavyweight from heavyweight, and for some reason is more durable down at light heavyweight, shedding the pounds than he is when he was up at heavyweight. But yeah, Lins is the pick, but I don't have a bet on it. So moving on to the next fight on the card, I'm just going to go ahead and roll right up on the prelims. Damon Blackshear is facing off against Luan Lacerda. It's another interesting fight. Blackshear open plus 115, Lacerda minus 135. Lacerda had 2/3 of the handle and 2/3 of the bets. Blackshear was right around 33% handle and 36% of the bets. So Lacerda winning in every category, essentially. As of today, it's swelled up. Lacerda's at minus 150, Blackshear plus 130. Lacerda 55% of the handle, 59% of the bets. Blackshear 45% of the handle and 41% of the bets. So Blackshear gaining a little bit as far as dollars coming in on him, but Lacerda, the line's moving in his favor. I can see why, just because Blackshear, a lot of his work gets done on the ground. He really has to mix in the wrestling, that top control, and he is really slippery on the ground as well with the scrambles. He normally can get out of bad positions on the ground. You saw that in the Basharat fight, where Basharat, when he was able to take him down, I think he even had him in mount once, or when he had him almost inside control. Blackshear's able to, shift his hips, get to a leg, work into a single, and get back up to his feet. But he also likes to mix in his own wrestling, and I think that's something that he showed in the Zalal fight that he took on short notice. He got Zalal's back in the second round, and he would have won that fight if he didn't absolutely gas because he took it on short notice. So Blackshear's definitely a game opponent, but Lacerda has that dangerous Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu where he'll go in for a takedown and he won't even try to finish it. He'll grab a single and he'll just pull guard, and in most cases his opponent doesn't get out of it. So he ends up he's looking for leg locks, he's looking for the submissions, and he's pretty lethal on the ground. So it's a dangerous place for Blackshear to stay. On the feet, before the Stamen fight, I would have gave it to Blackshear, but Lacerda really did show that he can pump those kicks, and those are really, really damaging kicks. They slap really hard. He's got really good kicks. He doesn't really have much as far as hands. Like, it's a jab, 1-2. He can throw it off cadence to try to catch his opponent off guard, but other than that, he kind of shells up when he's being pressured, which is something that I can see Damon really moving forward, because that's what he did against Basharat, because Basharat does the same thing. He can strike off the back foot a little bit, Fareed, but not like his brother, Javid. So he really shelled up when Blackshear was throwing a lot at him. Lacerda's not going to throw anything off the back foot. He's going to shell up and he's going to circle out. So if Blackshear sticks to the game plan, he definitely has an opportunity to win it. I'm going to go with Lacerda on this because the line's moving towards him. I don't have a bet on it, again, because I do see that path to victory for Blackshear, and I think it's a lot closer than the line indicates. But it's tough to go against Lacerda because if the fight does go to the ground, he's so lethal, and he showed that he can match Blackshear on the feet, especially with those kicks. So I'm going to go ahead with Lacerda there. Moving on to the next fight that we have on the card, which is Elise Reed versus Jin Yu Frey. So with this opened up as a pick'em at -110 for each fighter. Handle percent came in 84% on Reed, 16% on Frey, 70% of the bets with Reed, and 30% with Frey. So that has since swelled up. You have Elise Reed at -130, Frey's at +110, 94% of the handles on Reed, 73% of the bets, measly 6% on Jin Frey, 27% of the bets. So not going to spend too much time on this. This is a fight where I do have a bet. I took Elise Reed. I got her at -110 when it was at a pick'em. The reason being, she's the much more damaging striker out of the two. Jin Frey does a really good jab, and she has good volume, but she fought at atomweight before she came to the UFC. Forced to move up to strawweight. She used to be cutting down to, I'm not sure what atomweight is, whether it's 110 pounds or 105 pounds, but she was cutting down to that weight. Now she's fighting at 115. So she's, height-wise, yes, she's probably on par with the strawweight, but being that she used to fight at atomweight, I mean, she's going to be much smaller in terms of strength in the matchup, in my opinion. Elise Reed, I like her striking. She's kind of got that Taekwondo stance, karate, where she's in and out on the balls of her feet. She lands damaging shots. She fought a southpaw in Melissa Martinez, ended up dropping her in that fight, ended up winning that by decision, so it's not like she hasn't seen a southpaw before. I like her on the feet. I think she has the advantage on the feet. I think she can work good in the clinch against Frey, but I do worry about Frey in her wrestling because she does have a win on her record against Gloria DePaula, where she pretty much controlled her for about 10 minutes of that fight. The connection with that is Frey fights out of the same gym that Sam Hughes fights out of, who dominated Elise Reed on the mat. So, I mean, there's that intel exchange that's going to be there. And her coach is the same as well, Saif Saud. So, he has already seen the game plan unfold right before his eyes on how to beat Elise Reed. So if Frey can execute it, Elise Reed might be in trouble. But really, Frey is a primary striker, not too much as far as like a wrestler. So I really do think Elise Reed's going to have that success on the feet and see her grind out a decision. So looking good so far, about 20 cents. of CLV. We'll see where the line ends up closing on that one. But going with Elise Reed, and that is the first bet that we have. So moving on, we got Daniel Santos facing off against Johnny Munoz. So in this one, we got Santos open to minus 200, Munoz plus 170. Santos holds 85% of the handle, 15% for Munoz. This was the opener. And 71% of the bets with Santos, 29% of the bets with Munoz. So on this one, where are we at right now with that? Santos is minus 215, Munoz plus 185, so 15 cents worth of movement. Still 86% of the handle with Santos and 80% of the bets, 14% of the handle with Munoz and 20% of the bets. So in this one, I really like Willie Cat Santos. These two were scheduled to fight a couple weeks before, and I ended up getting Santos at minus 165, and I was pretty damn pumped about that. And then the fight got scrapped, and then they were able to open up closer to where it closed, which is at minus 200. I think it was minus 195 the weeks before. So pretty annoyed by that because it's a little too much juice for my liking. Thinking about playing Santos in a parlay, haven't yet, but I really like him in the matchup just with the pressure, the striking. Munoz doesn't offer much on the feet besides volume. His striking accuracy is right around 30%. Threw a ton of stuff at Ludovic Shalinian and ended up getting the decision win. I don't think Shalinian is a UFC caliber fighter at all. Munoz, really, his bread and butter is on the ground with his jiu-jitsu. And Daniel Santos showed against Castaneda that he can scramble for days on the ground. Yeah, he may get taken down, but he can get right back up to his feet, and he's just going to apply that pressure on Munoz and just grind this one out. If he doesn't get the finish in the second or third round, I think he's definitely going to bank at least 2 rounds and get that decision win. So really like Santos in the matchup. That's going to be my pick. Don't have a bet on it just yet, but we will see later on in the week. And by later on in the week, I mean within the next 2 days, because the clock is a-ticking. We are almost at fight day, which is dope. Anyway, moving on to the next matchup that we have. We got the ageless wonder, Andre Arlovski, facing off against Don'Tale Mayes. So, one hell of a fight. Let's take a look at where it opened. So, Arlovski opened plus 100. Mayes, slight favorite, minus 120. Arlovski at the time, 64% of the handle, 65% of the bets. Mayes on the comeback, 1/3 of that, right around 36% of the handle, 35% of the bets. So if we look at it right now, a lot has changed. Arlovski has moved slightly to plus 115. Mayes is minus 135. So money coming in on Mayes. 87% of the handle with Mayes, 37% of the bets. 13% of the handles on Arlovski, but 63% of the bets. So the large dollars are coming in on Don'Tale Mayes, and he's moved about, what was the line? Minus 120? Okay, so he's moved 15 cents. Not a lot of movement for the handle that's on him. And this is a tough one because normally, if there was a little bit more movement, I would like it. But it's Don'Tale Mayes. And Don'Tale Mayes has burned me so much in the past. It's not even funny. Like, the Hamdi Al-Wahab fight, I got him at when that opened up, minus 105. He swelled up to like something ungodly before the fight started, like minus 160, minus 170. Ignored everything on tape. I was like, this guy looks unathletic. Nothing great. He can wrestle a little bit, but I do not like him on the feet at all. Looks like a newborn giraffe. And boy, did he ever against Hamdi Al-Wahab. Lost a split decision. Turns out Al-Wahab was on the juice, so now it's turned to a no contest when you go look it up on Tapology. I don't see what everyone sees in Don'Tale Mayes. I think Arlovski can win this fight, and that's who I'm picking because Arlovski's steady. At this point in his career, he knows how to win fights, and he knows that he's not going to knock anyone out at his old age, so he's just a poster child for consistency. He's just out there. He's going to try to use his speed at heavyweight and just touch you. Just 1-2s, moving constantly, shifting, being defensively minded, trying to defend the takedowns and just back to it. Low leg kicks, chop the legs, just moving, just enough to annoy you. Nothing thrown to put you out, but it's just going to throw that volume at you and just make sure that he's touching you more than you're touching him. The only way I see Don'Tale Mayes winning this fight is if he can clip Andre Arlovski. And I don't think he's going to be able to do that. I think his striking, we're giving him a little bit too much credit on the feet. I don't think he can really throw anything that's going to hurt Arlovski. On the mat, I don't think he's going to be able to get it to the ground against Arlovski, who's got decent takedown defense. So I'm kind of baffled by this. My pick's Arlovski. I don't have a bet on it because the line's moving the wrong direction for me. If it was steady Eddie and it stayed around plus 100, maybe even plus 105, I probably would have a bet on Arlovski, but it's starting to move towards Mays. And unless there's a significant drop on Arlovski late, which I don't see happening because it's so late in the week, I'm just going to stay off it. So Arlovski's my pick. But yeah, I just don't doesn't make sense to me. All right, next two fights, I don't have an opening line on. So I'm just going to go ahead and go off of what I'm seeing right now because these ended up getting added so late because the fights dropped off and they got new opponents. So John Castaneda versus Muin Gafurov. Castaneda, minus 125 right now. Gafurov at plus 105. 95% of the handle with Gafurov, who's taking this fight on 5 days. And 76% of the bets with Gafurov. 5% of the handle on Castaneda, 24% of the bets. Pretty wild to see the amount of bets come in on Gafurov. The line hasn't moved at all yet. I like Gafurov. Obviously, give him the wrestling advantage, but Castaneda, he's a good wrestler as well. Great scrambles against Willie Cat. They kind of negated each other in that fight, but I really like the transitions that he had. Trying to go from mount and knowing when to get back up to his feet and let a position go. Haven't really seen him in any real danger on the ground. He really knows how to navigate himself and get back up to the feet. In that Santos fight, Santos went for a takedown. What I really liked is he attacked the neck with the guillotine just to get back up to his feet. He wasn't looking to finish it, but it was just enough that Santos had to address it, and then he could use that to get back up to his feet. And then he was up against the cage. All he had to do, Santos tried to take the back. He fought the hands, broke out of that clinch, and was back to par, which was the same strategy that happened in that Chad and Hellinger in his Contender Series fight against Gafurov. Same thing. Gafurov would go in for a takedown, grab the neck, did just enough to have Gafurov address it to give himself some space to get back up. So I like that out of Castaneda. Gafurov can close the distance with some hooks. He throws a lot into his shots. He does have some spinning attacks as well that are pretty cheeky. I just think at range, Castaneda is going to be able to kind of pick him apart. He's got the reach. He's quick. He's got slick kicks. He was able to hurt Willie Cat Santos with a head kick. Likes to hide it behind his shots. It's really sneaky. It's a close fight, but I do like John Castaneda in the matchup just for his weapons. I think he's going to be able to touch Gafurov more, and I think he's going to be able to work out of some of those bad positions that Gafurov puts him in on the ground, because I do think he'll get taken down, but I think he'll get right back up. And then I think on the feet, Castaneda, especially in the later rounds, is really going to be able to bring it to Gafurov, because taking the fight on 5 days' notice against Hellinger, he kind of started to gas as well. So I got to go with John Castaneda on that. Don't have a bet just yet, but it is one that I'm targeting. If the line stays where it's at, especially with the handle after weigh-ins, probably going to take John Castaneda. Moving on to the next fight, though. We got Jamie Malarkey taking on Muhammadjan Naimov. So if we look at the splits for this one, pretty interesting because I think Malarkey's going to steamroll him. I'm just going to put that out just straight away. Malarkey minus 460 right now. Muhammadjan Naimov plus 370. He was closer to plus 400 when this opened. I think some people are taking a flyer on the wide line because it's Jamie Malarkey. Handles close to even, 55 to 45 in favor of Malarkey, and the bets are 3 to 1, 74% Malarkey, 26% Naimov. I think Malarkey all around is better than Naimov. On the feet, he's got more weapons, uses a lot more kicks. He throws more in combination. Naimov has a good one too, solid jab, kind of a taekwondo stance. He throws a spinning back fist pretty frequently and has a decent feel on when to land it, but as far as the speed, I think Jamie Malarkey's faster than him. I think he's going to be able to touch him up on the feet. I don't see Naimov being able to clip him and really hurt him on the feet as well. Not really that one-punch KO artist. A couple of split decisions on the record as well, so those are fights that could have gone either way, in my opinion. And on the ground, he, in his Contender Series fight, he's facing off against Colin Anglin, who was 2 fights and done in the UFC and hasn't won since. He dominated Naimov on the ground. I mean, Naimov showed that he could resist the takedown, but once it got down to the ground, I mean, Anglin was able to put the hooks in. He had his back and had him in some pretty bad positions, especially at the end of round 2 when he was just had him flattened out and he was just wailing away. So Naimov ended up losing that fight to Anglin, and that's just a red flag for me. I don't think he's ready for the big show, but he's getting the chance because it's a short, like a replacement on short notice. I think Malarkey's going to just grind him out all around. And the one thing with Malarkey was he could get a little bit reckless on the feet. Kind of showed that in his previous fights, even the ones that he won, like against Devontae Smith, like he was pretty reckless, but it was just like I wouldn't say just controlled enough because he dominated Smith because in that second round, but like you could tell that he was just throwing wildly. He really reeled that in the Prado fight, his last fight. He fought smart. I think everyone and their mother, including myself, had the under in that fight, and it ended up going to a decision. And he dominated that fight the first round to the third round. And like he said in interviews, like if you go back and watch some of these UFC interviews that they've had with him, they asked him about his fighting style, and he's like, it's controlled aggression, picking my shots, knowing when to go in for the kill. So I do see him getting a finish in this, but I just don't see a path to victory for Naimov, just on the feet or on the ground. So going with Jamie Malarkey there, but the line's too wide. I don't have a bet on it. So that brings us to our main card. Kicking it off, we have Abubakar Nurmagomedov facing Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos. So with this fight, pretty interesting one because we had some line movement on that one. So Nurmagomedov open plus 120. Dos Santos was a favorite minus 135. Nurmagomedov had 70% of the handle, 77% of the bets. 30% were with Dos Santos for the handle, and 23% of the bets were with Dos Santos. So that line's closed the gap. It's now basically a pick'em. Nurmagomedov slightly favored. Minus 115 for Nurmagomedov, minus 105 for Dos Santos. 85% of the handle with Nurmagomedov and 77% of the bets. So Dos Santos holds that 15% of the handle and 23% of the bets. This is a tough one. I think it really depends on how much stock Dos Santos puts into Nurmagomedov's wrestling. If he doesn't respect it, if he's able to stuff a few takedowns and get confidence like he did against Saint Denis, and he's able to unleash those weapons on Nurmagomedov, he's going to win the fight. If Nurmagomedov can take him down or show him just enough, like, hey, this is going to be a threat where I can get you down and I can control you for periods of time, I think Dos Santos is going to shell up and he's not going to show those weapons. He's going to be hesitant to throw those kicks. He's going to be hesitant to let extended combinations go because he doesn't want to let Nurmagomedov be able to have that opening to duck under and get in on his hips and get that takedown. So it really is going to depend. I think a lot of people, the people that are betting Dos Santos in this fight, and I was on the Dos Santos train myself until I saw the line movement, took a look at the tape. Looking at the Saint Denis fight, yes, he can defend takedowns, okay? And he does have that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He can get back up to his feet. But the big difference in that fight was Saint Denis, his striking, he just stayed in the pocket for extended periods of time. And Nurmagomedov is the anti of that. He does not stay in the pocket. He doesn't throw a lot in combination. He'll throw that jab, and he works behind that jab, and he works behind that jab really well. That's probably his best weapon on the feet. He'll mix in a 1-2 and, a check hook here and there, but he doesn't stay in the pocket. Like when he stays at range, he'll throw a kick. He's just looking to touch you. And I think Dos Santos has the advantage at that range because he can throw a lot more than Nurmagomedov does. But as far as like getting hit and getting hurt, I don't think Nurmagomedov's going to be there for the receipt when he goes to throw a shot. It's going to be like a 1-2, get back out. So if he's able to mix that in, keep Dos Santos off balance, and then mix in a takedown, I see a path to victory for him. I'm going to go with Nurmagomedov. That's the way the line's moving. But I definitely can see how Dos Santos can win this fight. There's a long layoff for Dos Santos as well, but he's no stranger to long layoffs, so I don't think that's going to affect him too much. He definitely has the finishing equity in this fight, but that normally would lean me towards him. But the way Nurmagomedov fights, I don't think that this is going to be that there's going to be a finish in this fight. I think you're going to see Nurmagomedov take him down some extended periods of time on the ground. Dos Santos kind of looking in a mirror. and not throwing a lot. Nurmagomedov doing just enough to eke out a decision 29-28. So going with Nurmagomedov there. I don't have a bet on it, but another one that I'm eyeing. Moving on to the next fight that we have on the card, which is Korean Silva versus Ketlin Souza. This one opened, Silva was minus 175, Souza was plus 150. A lot of money in on Silva, 87% of the handle and 84% of the bets, and the line just blew up. So Silva's currently sitting at minus 225, Souza plus 190, and still 83% of the handle with Silva, 86% of the bets. So for Souza, she holds 17% of the handle and 14% of the bets. Women's MMA, that's a pretty wide line. It's tough for me to go with Souza, but if this fight stays standing, she definitely has a shot. She has really good stand-up. She can throw in combination, and her striking defense is pretty damn good as well. I think they're about even on the feet, but I think Silva really takes it if the fight's able to go to the ground. Now, the thing is, Silva, it's going to be a matter of whether she wants to take it to the ground or not, because she's not one to shy away from a striking battle and keeping it on the feet. You've seen that in her past performances, and I'd say on the feet, that's definitely Souza's best path. Use our words, Rob. Best path to victory. But at some point, I think the fight's going to go to the ground. I think it's going to be Silva's world, and I do think she's going to be able to just kind of dominate on the ground and eventually get a submission. So I'm going to go with Silva there. I don't have a bet on it because it's wide and it's women's MMA. So, anything over minus 200, it's really got to be a lock. And in this case, the underdog, if it were the other way around where Souza was like the dominant grappler, normally I favor grappling over striking because it's just in the MMA. In MMA, it's so much easier to take an opponent down and control them than it is to outstrike them and knock them out, that you really have an advantage more towards a decision with the wrestling, but that's not the case in this one. The favorite is the better grappler, so I'm going to go with Korean Silva there, but again, don't have a pick on it. Sorry, I do have a pick on it, Korean Silva. I don't have a bet on it. All right, that moves us to our next matchup, which is Tim Elliott versus Victor Altamirano. Boy, did a lot of stuff come out on Tim Elliott leading up to this fight, so we're not going to get into the gossip, but man, he's got a lot of extracurriculars going on outside of the cage, and I wish him all the best. I hope he gets it sorted out because, yeah, he unloaded a lot on the MMA Twitter world, and it was some pretty wild stuff. Let's just say Kevin Kroom, Gina Mazzani, not good people. Not good people. Anyway, let's take a look at the line. So Elliott opened minus 150, Altamirano opened plus 130. At that point, Altamirano, 66% of the handle and 57% of the bets, so he was leading in both those categories. But if we look at it now, Elliott is swelled up to minus 180, Altamirano plus 155. About even on handle, 52% of the handles with Altamirano, 48% with Tim Elliott, and 38% of the bets with Altamirano, 62% of the bets with Tim Elliott. So a lot of people going with Tim Elliott. I've seen a lot of people online liking the under, which I do not like at all. I think this fight's going to a decision easily. Both guys are very durable. Victor Altamirano has never been finished as well. So, that's just, I guess we're betting off of emotion. But in this one, Tim Elliott, very awkward style, but it really does work for him. Good pressure is always going to be in your face. Ton of cardio for days. He can go 16 rounds if he really wants to. Plus wrestler, good on the ground, good ground and pound, just all around, just a staple in the flyweight division for such a long time, and you don't do that without being solid. Victor Altamirano, very well rounded on his side as well. He's good on the feet, just throwing a ton of volume. You saw that in his last fight against Vinicius de Salvador. Just rounds 1 and 2, he was just constantly in his face. And for a guy, Salvador, who likes to do the same, likes to pressure, he was just on his back foot more often than not. Altamirano, when Salvador was about to get going as well, Altamirano ducked down for a takedown, just mixed his martial arts really well. Won a pretty solid, I wouldn't say dominating performance because Salvador came on late, but definitely a solid 29-28 across the board for Altamirano, in my opinion. So in this fight, it's going to be tough. I think it's pretty close. I think the line's a little wide for my liking. I think Altamirano has a real shot in this one just because he throws a ton. If he keeps Elliott on his back foot and he's throwing that volume and he's digging to the body like he has before, the one thing I worry about is Elliott having the wrestling advantage. I think he can get Altamirano down. Even though Altamirano's solid down there and I think he's going to be able to get back up to his feet, I think Elliott can chew on that control time minutes and really help make his case to win the decision. But in this fight, believe it or not, I do like Victor Altamirano. I don't have a bet on it because the line's moving the other way, which kind of shocked me. I thought there'd be more love for Altamirano, but Tim Elliott, I think people like his pace, his cardio, and maybe his story. I don't know, with everything that he's got going on. But I like Altamirano in the fight. I think he's just going to be able to outvolume Tim Elliott on the feet, maybe even hurt him. And I think that's kind of going to negate the control time that Elliott's going to get. I think he's going to end up eking out a decision. So Altamirano is my pick. Don't have a bet on it, especially with Elliott, with everything going on outside of the cage, like I had mentioned, that he's dealing with. I mean, it's tough to train through that. I know people think that that's going to be his motivation to get in there and just, really rip Altamirano's head off, but it can go either way, man. It can really, take away from your focus in fight camp. So going with Victor Altamirano, that's going to be the pick, but I don't have a bet on it. Next fight that we have on the card actually just got scrapped. Jim Miller versus Jared Gordon pulled out. No surprise there because Jared Gordon got knocked out literally a month ago. Was an illegal head blow? Yes, it was. Did it count as a loss on his record? No, it did not. But he took this fight on short notice and he got knocked out a month ago. There's no shocking, not a shocker that he pulled out of this fight. So Jim Miller's getting a new opponent, but we don't know who it is yet. So until then, let's move on to our co-main event, which is Alex Caceres facing off against Daniel Pineda. So Caceres opened a -170 favorite, Pineda +145. 90% of the handle with Caceres and 61% of the bets to open up, which is pretty wild. So if we take a look at where they're at now, Caceres is -180, so 10 cents movement towards him in his favor, +155 for Pineda, and that's kind of been the way it has for the last 3 to 4 days. Pretty steady on that line, not a shred of movement on it. 70% of the handle with Alex Caceres, 30% with Daniel Pineda, 73% of the bets with Caceres, 27% of the bets with Pineda. So I've been back and forth on this fight for a while. And honestly, I think ultimately I'm going to go with Daniel Pineda because I think he's the guy who can finish the fight. I think a lot of people don't like Pineda because he's shown that he might get tired later on in fights. I think against Tucker Lutz, he showed that he's able to consistently grapple and strike at a decent pace. It wasn't the most high-paced fight, but definitely a lot of back and forth. And he looked solid all the way through, including the second round. So I think Caceres, he can put a pace on him, but I think Pineda is the much more damaging striker, and he's got the finishing equity by far in this fight. He's good on the ground. He's able to scramble out of bad positions against Herbert Burns, who's really just a jiu-jitsu ace. If there's anything positive to say about Herbert Burns, is he's got great jiu-jitsu. And he showed that he's really good on the ground. I mean, Caceres has improved on the ground, but I'd say I'd have to give Pineda the edge there. And on the feet, Pineda, what I really liked in his last fight was he's chopping at those legs, and that's the same thing that Sadiq Yusuff did against Caceres when he fought him. He was chopping those legs the entire fight. I think Pineda, if he can do that and he can mix in some power shots, Caceres is liable to get dropped. I think he can have some real success, and I like him as the underdog here. Again, I don't have a bet on him. I'm thinking about pulling the trigger, but we'll see in the next upcoming days. These lines, this fight card, I was trying to save it till the end, but I'm just going to say it here. It's kind of tough with the movement, especially with the week off and them dropping the lines really late. It's kind of been very slow, progress with the lines, and haven't really been able to see any sharp movement, which is really what triggers me to be like, okay, here's the time to place a bet. So the next fight I do have a bet on in the main event, but for this one I'm gonna pass right now. But my pick is Daniel Pineda, and that's gonna lead us into our main event between Amir Albazi and Kai Kara-France. Taking a look back and looking at this lines, it really hasn't budged or moved at all. So we opened Albazi -115, Kai Kara-France -105. As far as the handle, 64% of the dollars were on Kai Kara-France, 36% for Amir Albazi. As far as the percent of bets, pretty close, 47% for Albazi and 53% for Kai Kara-France. So if we take a look at it now, really hasn't budged. It's a pick 'em at minus 110 for both sides. Handles about dead even. Slight advantage at Kai Kara-France at 52%. And as far as the percent of bets, pretty much deadlocked there. Slight advantage with Kara-France again at 56%. So when you look at this matchup, really I think what everyone thinks it boils down to is, can Amir Albazi get Kai Kara-France down to the ground? And I think Kai Kara-France bettors, you can see that path to victory. If you value his striking and you feel that he has a large advantage over Amir Albazi, you've seen Kai Kara-France overcome a grappling advantage before in multiple fights. Rogerio Bontorin had his back for all of the first round, was hunting the rear naked choke, had a body triangle, I think, on him as well. Kara-France was able to get out of that and then finished him off within the same round. Against Askar Askarov, again, Askarov climbs on his back in the first round. He has the body triangle. He's looking for that submission the entire time, rides his back in the first round, dominates. But then in the second and third, he starts to slow down. Kara-France starts stuffing the takedowns, and he's just able to outvolume him on the feet. He did more damage and won a pretty decisive decision in my book. I don't really think that fight was close. I think it was a clear 29-28 for Kai Kara-France. But if you look at Albazi, I mean, I think he's really being devalued for striking. He can strike, and he's not a guy like an Askar Askarov or a Rogerio Bontorin who's really dependent on their grappling advantage. Both of those guys, I would say that their striking is below average, in my opinion. Bontorin just closes the distance with big looping hooks, leaves himself open. He's a defensive liability. He ducks his head. He's open for knees up the middle. And Askar Askarov is just desperately trying to get the fight to the ground, and you know that from the beginning. He tries to strike to get it in the back of your mind, but you ultimately know that he's going to be shooting those takedowns. He's going to be trying to get in the clinch. He's going to be able to try to claw his way onto your back so he can boom, body triangle, and then choke you out for the submission. Amir Albazi is a little bit different than those two guys, in my opinion. I think Amir Albazi's striking is a little undervalued. I think he can compete on the feet with Kara-France. I think he showed that in the Costa fight most recently. In Dominic Cruz on that broadcast, you can see it. I mean, he's talking about Albazi striking. Albazi starts off with the 1-2s, the jabs. He's doing a lot of nice feints to try to draw out the counter of Costa. And then he really hurts him when he starts to switch up his punch count. He was able to drop him twice. It was just, he goes from a 1-2, instead throws a straight left, drops him. The shot that put him out in the third round, instead of throwing the 1-2, Costa going over and over with that counter, trying to counter with the hook. And Albazi, instead of throwing a 1-2, throws a short jab, boom, uppercut, floors him. So it's just that striking prowess. I think his striking defense is pretty solid. He is liable to get hit, but he can avoid the big shot. And I think he's going to be able to compete on the feet. And I think it's going to be surprising to see that Albazi's on the feet for as long as he is. And I think he can really win rounds when he just steals the round with the takedown. If there's not a lot going on, Kara-France is in and out, he's kind of just touching him. Because Kara-France can close the distance really well, so I don't want to feel like I'm discrediting his striking. Like, he is a high-level striker for the flyweight division. He has heavy hands, but he closes the distance really well. And it's normally the third or fourth shot that ends up really hurting his opponent. Albazi, I think he can shell up. He can avoid the big shot. He can land a few shots on the zone because Kara-France can get hit. And then he can steal the round late by just being competitive on the feet and then getting that takedown, getting some ground and pound and working that to really convince the judges in the decision. So my pick is Albazi. I took Albazi at minus 110. I really thought the line was going to start to sway in his favor, but it hasn't budged since, which is okay. I do think that he's going to show a lot of people that he's a more complete mixed martial artist than what people really think. So I'm going with Amir Albazi, and that concludes the card. So looking forward to Saturday, UFC Vegas 74. Again, follow Bobby Betts Fights on Twitter, on YouTube, and betmma.tips. Currently up on the year, 15.78 units, which equates to $789 in profit. Looking to push over into $800 on the year with this card. So look forward to, as I said before, look forward to the card. And I hope everyone is able to cash some bets, and I hope I provided some insight that you may not have already had. So, cheers, Bobby Betts Fights, signing off.